At Feday.email, you don't need to compromise faith to participate in the modern world. Instead of pushing ads and invasive practices that conflict with Catholic values, we built Feday to reclaim technology for Christendom. When you use Feday.email, you declare your commitment to technology that defends Christian tradition. Join Feday.email today and use technology to advance Christendom.
A few days ago, I gave you an update, or I gave you a story that I felt was compelling, and that was the story of, in the state of Washington, the seal of confession was broken, essentially by act of law. A Catholic governor and some Catholic apostates who were in the legislature finally passed a law requiring the seal of confession to be broken. And the governor cited his Catholic bona fides, his Jesuit priest uncle, and his love for Catholicism as he signed a bill into law that excommunicated himself. He incurred an automatic excommunication because he leveled the tools of Caesar to undermine the church. That law required, if a McCarrick type offense, meaning a priest, a man who is not should under no circumstances have been made a priest, does something to a young person, we'll say, and then they go to confession for it, the seal of confession has to be broken. If a priest who is not of such a type hears someone come into confessional and say the same thing that they did, a private person, that they did something and they confess it, the priest is expected to violate the seal of confession. And if they don't, they'll go to jail. For those who aren't aware, if a priest does that, breaks the seal of confession, they incur automatic excommunication. They're no longer a priest. They're no longer even a Catholic. This can be lifted through confession, I believe, to their bishop or to the Pope, but beyond that, they've lost everything. And so now priests face the choice between jail and standing up for the gospel. Essentially, the choice is jail or excommunication. Which are you going to choose? A good Catholic will say they'll go to jail. And I mention this because we have a response to this. The Bishop of Seattle actually issued a short but compelling response. And it reflects something I've said before. I said when reporting on this. In very few things will you see near universal agreement across the great divide in the church between hardline traditionalists and hardline traditionally minded Catholics who are very conservative on one side, and on the other side, the James Martin types and the hypermodernist Bergoglian types. But you will on one topic at least, and that is the seal of confession. Archbishop Etienne of Seattle posted a letter in response. He was appointed to his post by Pope Francis in 2019. His letter is called Clergy, Answerable to God or State. Published yesterday. Published May 4th, 2025. To his own website. Here is the text of his letter. I present it to you for your consideration. And if you are a priest in the state of Washington seeing this, I would assume by now you've seen this letter. If not, prayerfully consider what is being asked of you. Here's the Archbishop in his words. Towards the end of this year's legislative session, the Washington State Legislature passed a bill, SB 5375, making all clergy mandatory reporters of grave harm done with no exemptions for the privileged communication between priest and penitent during the sacrament of reconciliation. This means that by Washington state law, Catholic clergy are now required to violate the seal of the sacrament of reconciliation, better known to many as confession. On Friday, May 2nd, 2025, Governor Ferguson signed the bill into law. This weekend at Mass, the first reading was from the Acts of the Apostles. After the apostles were arrested and thrown into jail for preaching the name of Jesus Christ, St. Peter responded to the Sanhedrin, "We must obey God rather than men." See Acts chapter 5, verse 29. This is our stance now in the face of this new law. Catholic clergy may not violate the seal of confession, or they will be excommunicated from the church. All Catholics must know and be assured that their confessions remain sacred, secure, confidential, and protected by the law of the church. The Catholic Church agrees with the goal of protecting children and preventing the worst deeds that can be done to them. The Archdiocese of Seattle remains committed to reporting such acts. working with victim survivors towards healing and protecting all of the most young and vulnerable. Our policies already require priests to be mandatory reporters, but not if this information is obtained during confession. The Catholic Church in the U.S. has been committed to preventing this for many decades, reporting incidences of such to law enforcement and cooperating with civil authorities. In the Archdiocese of Seattle, such efforts began in 1986. While we remain committed to protecting minors and all vulnerable people from this, priests cannot comply with this law if the knowledge of this evil is obtained during the sacrament of reconciliation. Various forms of this bill attempted to provide limited protections for privileged communications, but those accommodations for religious practice prevented this bill from passing in previous legislative sessions. Conversations between the Washington State Catholic Conference staff and legislators in efforts to collaborate on an amicable solution eventually failed this session, ushering this most extreme version of the bill to pass and receive the governor's endorsement. What began as a well-intentioned effort ended in a problematic and unnecessary version of the bill signed into law. Once the approved bill went to the governor for his signature, the bishops of the state of Washington asked for a meeting to discuss our concerns with the governor, who unfortunately did not respond to our request. The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution states, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof." With this law, the state of Washington is specifically targeting religious conduct by inserting the government into Catholic tradition, namely the highly defined ritual of the sacrament of reconciliation. The state is now requiring priests to violate an essential element of the rite, confidential communication between the priest and penitent in which the absolution of sin is offered. This law also attempts to supersede the Code of Canon Law, which states, quote, "The sacramental seal is inviolable, therefore it is a crime for a confessor in any way to betray a penitent by word or in any other manner or for any reason. And a confessor who directly violates the seal of confession incurs an automatic latae sententia excommunication reserved to the apostolic see." Let's pause here. They have to go to the Pope unless the Pope delegates this to the bishop. That's how serious this is. Let's continue. Once the state asserts the right to dictate religious practices and coerce information obtained within this sacrament, privileged communication, where is the line drawn between church and state? What else may the state now demand the right to know? What other religious practices will it try to legislate? Why is this privileged communication between priest penitent the only one singled out? Why not attorney-client, doctor-patient, spouses? This new law singles out religion and is clearly both government overreach and a double standard. The line between church and state has been crossed and needs to be walked back. People of every religion in the state of Washington and beyond should be alarmed by this overreach of our legislature and governor. And that is his letter. He invokes the separation of church and state, which is, one, not even in the Constitution anyway, and two, not something the Catholic Church has ever actually endorsed. But the question remains, after reading that, will Archbishop Etienne excommunicate Governor Ferguson, a self-described Catholic? Or, to be more clear about it, will he confirm the automatic excommunication Governor Ferguson incurred for harming the church? Because that is exactly what he did. He incurred an automatic excommunication. If the Archbishop is watching, which I doubt, but if one of the people in his chancery are, this needs to be considered. This is an attack on the faith, unlike anything we've seen in recent history in the United States. And it's time to stop letting this happen without pushing back. All that is needed to be done is to simply enforce the standing law. Now, on the secular law side of this, I saw some lawyers chiming in on this over the weekend, and there's a universal agreement that this is going to get laughed at the Supreme Court, because when you read the text of the law, it explicitly targets the clergy and Catholic clergy, again, explicitly. This is a grotesque overreach of American constitutional principles, and the Supreme Court is going to laugh it out of court by at least 6-3. Hopefully, they'll take this case up in the current session. Thank you for the super chat, BYM. It is greatly appreciated. He also said below, curious language from Benedict XVI Declaratio, and a conclave to select the Supreme Pontiff will have to be convoked by those whose competence it is. Why not just by all the cardinals? Because sometimes they like to use unnecessarily wordy language for these things. I kind of mentioned that when I was talking about Cardinal Mueller yesterday, that he gets himself into trouble because he sometimes forgets, it seems, that his public writings are often read by people who are not cardinals and bishops and priests, when it looks like that he's very clearly writing for trained theologians in a lot of his writings. But yes, this needs to be opposed. And I'm hoping Catholic lawyer groups will immediately challenge this law and take it to the Supreme Court as quickly as possible to get this thing struck down. Curious what you think about all this. Let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Sharing this on social media helps as well. And please pray that we do not get that. Pope Fernandez, maybe? He posed as pious as he could on the Mass. Yeah. John Dillon does warn us, never rely on the Supreme Court to do the right thing. This is true. Don't rely on the Supreme Court to do the right thing. There's at least one of the conservatives and Catholic members who is not reliable on these things at all, Miss Barrett. But please pray that they do the most basic right thing. This should get overturned 9-0 because it's so blatant. I'm curious, though, again, what do you think about this? Let me know in the comments, please. Again, hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly helps. Sharing this on social media helps, too. If you ever thought about supporting the work we do here at Return to Tradition through Patreon, the join button below, subscribe star, and all the other options does help keep these daily messages coming and is greatly appreciated. And pray for the Church and for the College of Cardinals at this time. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.